30-something years ago, I started my career in the NHS as a junior surgeon. Loved doing everything that goes with surgery, but found that the system was often a lot sicker than the patient. So I've spent most of my career playing with the system, 20-something years in South Devon, and the last 9 years now with the Horizons team. And what we do is help people with large problems. So at the moment I'm working on how do we get the country to be a bit more active with Sport England. We're thinking about future workforce, all sorts of things where the answers are not straightforward. And I've been asked to talk to you a little bit about how might we apply some of those ideas to running hospitals, the facilities and everything that happens behind the scenes that enables us to do stuff. So I thought I'd start here with a nice picture, and you're probably looking at the ice cube and thinking, life's not cool at the moment, actually. Yeah, we had all of our structures, everything worked very nicely. We've got our standard operating procedures, and we just can't maintain the quality. Things are melting away, things that you were certain of even 2 years ago, you can no longer be certain of. So what's going on, and why do we need to think about this differently? Well, here's a sort of your bed change team. Anybody's bed change team look remotely like this? How many of you measure the process down to the last 3 seconds or 3 microseconds? No, I didn't think so. So why is this relevant to creating movements for change? Well, firstly, we don't think about it in that sort of team-orientated and goal-orientated way. And when I stopped being involved in running hospitals, I wrote a report called Understanding Flow in Hospitals. And one of the things we looked at, and apologies at the back, you don't really need to worry about the numbers, is the whole pattern of hospitals is changing. One of the things I used to do on a Sunday afternoon is admit people for surgery on a Monday afternoon. And the whole idea was that they'd sit in bed and they'd read a book and they'd calm down and everything would be wonderful. Well, the first thing we had to do was give them sleeping tablets. And obviously it's not like that anymore. We're into day surgery. And what's happening in most hospitals is the number of people going through the front end of the hospital is massively increased. And we have a story about, well, let's discharge everybody by midday. But actually, that's only a tiny percentage of the work. So the mental model of how we need to prepare the hospital for the next set of patients, the nature of the work that's going through them is changing all the time. How long do we spend thinking about that and really understanding the numbers? And what difference does it make? So we just put this figure in just to try and jolt people's memory and say, well, if you've got a patient who's going to spend 12 hours in your hospital, if it takes 3 hours to sort out the cleaning and the changeover routine, that's 25% of the length of stay. That's quite big. Meanwhile, if somebody's spent at the other end of the hospital 28 days in hospital, a delay of 3 hours is 0.2%. But we try and treat all of the place the same. We don't think through what's going on. And my first sort of call is really have a think about what you're seeing, because what you're seeing might not be what you really are seeing. And how do you build some other perspectives? So go away from that quite detailed level to why are all these patterns changing? And when I realised the work we were doing in South Devon was really great, but it wasn't sustainable, I came across this book, The Three Horizons, The Patterning of Hope. And what Bill Sharp talked about was the first horizon, the way we do things now, will break down. It will become less prevalent as you move through time. Meanwhile, there are always smart people coming up with new ideas, and there was some fantastic stuff next door, new ideas that can completely change processes, fighting to get into the space, and some of them will do really, really well and become the third horizon, and in the middle is this sort of second horizon. And what Bill talks about is that gap between where those two lines cross over. Sometimes, when everything in the current world is unstable, can take 20 to 50 years to cross. So a whole career, or in fact 2 whole careers. So we are in this period of massive change, and that can feel quite lonely. When you're trying to grapple with all of this stuff, you've got the weight of responsibility on your shoulders, and I've been a COO of a hospital. I know what that feels like. And nobody else is that interested in your problem. Familiar? Anybody notice that? A few nods around the room. So what can you do about it? And just to say, I tested out a bit of innovation for this talk. That image was completely AI generated. So I want an image of a lonely person, and so it's the only bit of AI in the talk, I think. So you can do 2 things. One is you can get a whiteboard or a blackboard, and you can look at it really hard. And you can see the byline. I think you should be more explicit here in step 2. Anybody feel that being familiar? You're asked to solve a problem, you go and solve the problem. I want to suggest that that is problematic in the sort of changing world that we're talking about. So is it a technical problem that you can sit behind your desk or stand at a whiteboard and solve, or is it about changing the way we think about it? Most of them are about changing the way we think about it. And what's also changing is the way we think about levering change. And some research has been done that basically says that prod mechanisms, more targets, more performance management, more incentives, 10% effective. So if you're spending all of your time at your whiteboard coming up with new targets, you're probably not going to change the way you get work done very much. What's much more effective is proactive support and being people-focused. I'm going to say a little bit more about that. The other big problem is no matter how much you write into your standard operating procedures, how much of the reality of the job does that really cover? You might be lucky, but quite often you'll talk to people as you go around a hospital, and there's a huge gap between work as designed and work as done and work as imagined. And what actually happens is the tacit knowledge is really important to your teams, and really important to thinking about how to mobilize change. So if you are thinking only in terms of your procedures, you're likely to miss a lot of what's really going on. So are you going to change it like that? There's a certain irony to this picture. Or do you need to produce something like this? And I would suggest that if you're going to create the sort of change where people really live it and they feel like they own the change that you want to do, you need to be thinking about how to get them involved in the process. And there's a whole world of work going on in this territory. This is just one example from Greg Sattle. And the first thing is defining the change. How do you tell a story that gets people involved? Second is finding allies. You will always find allies, people who are frustrated, and the more you can find the allies and help them, the better you will be in tackling some of the pillars of power. And you need to get both on board if you're going to get these sorts of changes to happen, so that you can attract more people and hopefully survive victory. How many changes have you introduced, gone away on your holidays, come back and find everybody's forgotten it? Yeah, that's when you go too much for the knowledge, not enough for the tacit knowledge, not enough for the team building. The other problem to avoid is saying, well, I've worked it all out, I've been at my blackboard, this is the answer, I'm ready for action, therefore everybody else is ready for action. What we know from behaviour change is before people get to action, they like to think about it. So think about your next holiday. Where are you going to go? Pre-contemplation. Shall we even have a holiday? Shall we even have a holiday? Let's have a holiday. What are we thinking about? We want to go whitewater rafting. We want to go and lie by the beach. How are we going to do that? Are we going to go to Birmingham International, or are we going to go a different route? And then we get to the point of action. And in your day-to-day jobs, you often get to the point of action before everybody else has decided they're actually going to have a holiday. And that causes you some problems in leading change, because you are at the point in the bottom left of this drawing where you think there's agreement and you know what to do. If you're in that position, it's always a good idea to do something like this on a flip chart paper and get people to put some dots about where they are. It's really, really depressing if you're the project manager, because usually you'll find that you think everybody is here and you'll have dots everywhere else. And what you need to do if you're in that situation is find a way of having that kind of social chat to build a shared understanding of what to do. So what Mark Jabin tells us to do is, when you've got an issue, do not sweat at the whiteboard, working through what the outcome could be, what all the options are, and the choice, and then go, da-da, cracked it. Your job is going to change completely tomorrow. You need to go over to the right-hand side and say, well, we've got an issue. How can we get people involved in talking about that? How can we explore the issues and then get people involved in the choices? And then they're kind of already trained. They're already involved in it, and it'll make a big difference to your work. So I won't go into this model in great detail, but the key point here is if you're doing anything large, and pretty much anything in a big hospital setting is large, you have to spend time framing it. And the framing loop, which is the circle in the slide, is, I think these are the issues. What do you think? Have that engaging conversation. What can we do about it? And what the theory says is sometimes you have to go round that loop many, many times before you come up with an answer. So give yourself the time for that, and don't get rushed into trying to make quick decisions for things that there aren't quick answers for. This, again, I won't go into great detail. This is just about sharing things that you might not have come across before. This is Donella Meadows' leverage points. And the idea here is that if you're out at number 1 over on the right-hand side of the slide, you can have a much bigger change in your system than if you're over towards the left. And the things that are over on the right-hand side are about changing the mindset. So how can we do something completely differently? What sort of shifts in the goals of the system? What sort of shifts in the social system? What sort of shifts in the rules can we create to change the situation? And those sorts of questions might get you into a completely different approach to making change happen. A lot of it comes down to how you think about it. And our team have done a lot of thinking about how do you do really big changes, but also how does it feel? This stuff's really quite difficult to do. But what's coming through if you want to get change to happen is there are some things that you usefully can know, and there are some things about how you think about the problem. And one of the key things in sort of complex change in the world at the moment is how can you hold multiple things at the same time? So we need to feed people quicker, but actually they're only going to be here for a very short time. We need to think through how we're going to get people through the hospital, or in fact we're doing a virtual ward. There's nobody in the hospital. We've got a different set of problems. How are we going to get the kit to them at home? All of these completely different problems, you need to be thinking through those in terms of both the short and the long term, and aiming to be optimistic. There's a lot of evidence that if you can maintain an optimistic mindset, you'll carry more people with you, and not a major surprise, but it's sometimes quite easy to forget. So how do you acquire those skills? Well, two thoughts here. One is it's learnable. So we run something called the School for Change Agents as a virtual course, and talk about some of the different approaches to building movements and delivering large change. Things like how do you create energy for change, things like how do you tell your story, how do you deal with old power and new power, which is a similar sort of thing to the earlier idea of pillars of power and allies, and how can you get more people on board. So many of you will have come across things like end PJ paralysis. That's a sort of social movement about how do you get people out of beds and moving around a hospital on a page, not on a 25 megabyte file. So you can start to think through how can you get your outcome and deliver it in different ways. So the next version of that is coming up, and there's a QR code which you can grab if you're interested. The other is an example which might also be interesting in terms of Proud to be Ops, and Emma leads our team now, and she also leads Proud to be Ops. And going back to that lonely position, there are networks for chief execs, there are networks for estates officers, there are networks for finance directors, not many networks for operational people. How many networks have you got? I mean, you're obviously all here. Great to have a network to share ideas with. And so what Emma did was set up this thing called Proud to be Ops. And what's now happening with Proud to be Ops is it's creating mini Proud to be Ops in lots of hospitals around the country. And it starts off with people doing the sort of traditional bit of running a surgical department or a medical department. Well, what's to say people involved in facilities can't be proud to be ops from a facilities point of view? And how Emma's made that work is thinking about this whole process of connecting with peers, building knowledge together, sharing practical excellence, to energize, connect, and develop. So the point of that story is you can start, if you want to, from where you are. And that's now growing into a really big network, which is helping people do their jobs. So just to finish, the movement starts with you and how you think about change. My contention is we're not going to go back to how things were. The amount of change necessary to get the health service functioning at the level we all want it to be is going to be massive. Nobody knows what that looks like, and even though there'll be papers from government, from a whole raft of people, ultimately it comes down to us to do something. And my contention to you is don't start by spending too long at the whiteboard. Get up, have a chat with your colleagues, build a movement, and let's see what we can achieve. Thank you very much.